What's happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast. We are in for a treat today. We have Beate Chelette, also known as Beyonce to some. No, Beate Chelette is the growth architect and founder of the Women's Code and provides visionaries and leaders with strategies that grow their authority so that they can scale their impact. Beate bootstrapped her passion for photography into a global business and eventually sold it to Bill Gates in a multi-million-dollar deal. I can't wait to hear about that. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. I'm awesome. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's truly my pleasure. So the whole thing, I asked her, how do I make sure to pronounce your name correctly? And she said, every time it transcribes, it comes out as Beyonce, but you are fabulous, even more so than Beyonce. Tell me your story. This is I love bootstrapped her photography into a global. That's not just here in the States. That's talking about your native country of Germany. We're talking all over. How in the world did you do that, Beate?
97 countries to be exact. So we, yes, the story is probably starts like most stories start with the unruly child that just felt that there was a lack of fitting in somewhere, or probably how my mother would describe it, this exaggerated self that I was here for something special, right? When people say, oh, so you think you're so special? Yeah, I am. I just have, give me a minute to figure out what that exactly is. So if you're listening to this and that's what you're thinking, you are in luck, because yes, you are. And then, just the journey that started with a true love for the creative arts, and then my realization that I was much better at the business side behind the creativity than I was at the creative part. I realized that in order to be a great artist, you need a lot of time and develop that craft. And the other part just was easier for me. So I was a photographer. I was a photo editor at Elle magazine. I immigrated to the United States, and then I was an artist representative for photographers, a still photography producer. I was working for companies like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Wrangler, Levi's, really great names. People came from all over the world to produce with me here in Los Angeles. And then I hit what I call a decade of bad luck. And we talking fires, floods, riots, earthquake, a lawsuit, September 11, a tsunami. And the hits just kept coming. And I'm $135,000 in debt as a single mom. Don't know I'm going to put food on the table. So I had to come up with, how am I going to figure out how to crack this code and make things happen?
Wow. A decade of bad luck. We're not talking like a day. We're not talking a month. We are talking a decade and a six-figure debt. So, all right, we're facing this mountain of debt, a child to provide for, lots of responsibilities. So, how do we dig ourselves out of that hole? Because people listening in here, they're probably dealing with some of that stuff, maybe hopefully not all of that, but clearly you not only dug your way out, you thrived. So how in the world do you go about that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things that are noteworthy. So number one, there is a part where you have to do everything is in your power, and then you have to surrender.
Mm.
And so that part came for me when I wrote a letter to the President of the United States. And it's a true story. And I said, well, dear Mr. President, you always talk about the small business being the backbone of the American economy. I said, but there's really nothing else I can do. That's it. I'm out cold. I mean, I'm $135,000 in debt. We've been recessions, inflations, riots. I mean, it's all happening, and I just cannot get up. I cannot catch a break. And then I leave and I fly to Germany to visit my dad and to drum up some business. And my dad has a stroke. My dad didn't have a stroke. My dad had pancreatic cancer, and my dad dies 6 weeks later. Then we are at the funeral in Nether Bavaria on this, beautiful small mountain overlooking the valley in front of this gorgeous Baroque church. And my phone rings after we literally put my father in the ground. And it's my office and says, we've just been served a notice. So now I'm losing the house. I didn't own the house, but it was the new landlord and whatever. So I'm standing there and I'm going like, I have done everything. I've written the business plan. I've got my act together. I don't lie. I don't cheat. I don't steal. I'm in integrity. I keep my word. I'm trying to provide for my daughter. I'm been going through this terrible divorce. There really literally was nothing else I could do. And so I fell on my knees. I raised my fist and I yelled at God and I said, now here's the deal. If you have a plan, this would be an excellent time to fill me in. Because literally there was nothing else I could do other than call the bankruptcy attorney. And I think that the critical part, if you find yourself in this position, so if your listeners are in this position, surrender is literally the only thing you can do. And then I let it go. I'm like, I guess I'm on for the ride now. I come back, I get a letter from the White House. And it says the president sends his best wishes. I'm sure the president never even saw this letter. But it put me in touch with the Small Business Administration, with the second in command, not with some, low-lying, but the top guy. I walk in with my business plan fully prepared. And he says, I'll put in what you put in. And for the first time, I had hope. And so 3 months later, they found me a bank that took my $135,000 in credit card debt and turned it into a 10-year fixed term loan, freed up my line of credit. 3 months later, I'm break even. This is how close this is. 3 months, we're talking 3 months between bankruptcy and break even. 18 months later, I'm the world leader in my industry. And that's when the Bill Gates company comes and knocks on the door and says, hey, will you tell us how you do it? And I said, absolutely not. You want it, you buy it. And they made me a multimillion-dollar offer.
My favorite part about this, I empathize with who you were and what you're going through. And you're probably the same amazing soul back then, just caught, like you said, a decade of shit luck. But wow, what an amazing turnaround. Now everybody looks at you as this world leader, but you're going, wait a minute, guys, you didn't see the hardships. And that's what I'm loving about this. Talk to me about surrender, because it's a really big word. It's one of my favorite words because of how much it truly has impacted me as well. To be able to truly just, here I am, and not fight, but rather allow things to come into my world and accept them. So what does that look like for you? That's just a fascinating idea, and to have such a radical turnaround in such a short period of time.
So interesting that we're having this conversation, because just before I got on this call, I was on the call with my performance coach, and we had this exact conversation about surrender again. So what I think happens is that, and you tell me if this is what happens in surrender with you too, because I think this is a really important conversation, is we're pushing at that next level and people are falling off. They are some of the people that we used to be good friends with suddenly, say stupid stuff, and now we're not friends with them anymore. I just got thrown out 2 days ago out of a group that I paid for, a high ticket group. I don't even know why. Nobody told me, no warning. I've been just eliminated. I have no idea, right? So I have now different choices. I can fight and say, why is this happening? They're wrong. I'm going to show them. I'm going to go after them. I can't even entertain a stupid thought like I'm going to sue them. Don't do that. Or I can step back and say, if it is true that what I teach other people, which is when you go to a certain level, not everybody's going to come with you. So you're going to have to let those people go with love. Oh, but when it happens to other people, it's so much easier than when it's happening to me. But now it's happening to me. And then I need to remind myself who's really in charge here. Like what happened the other time I had this massive breakthrough, right? From from disaster to this next big level of breakthrough. It didn't happen until surrender, because I let go. I let God, universe, spirit do their job, because we are only in charge of the beginning, the point where we are right now and where we want to go, and holding that vision. But the path there, we get so easily pulled into that illusion that we are now in charge of that 10-step plan that gets us exactly from here to the $1 million, the great relationship, the thought leadership, the authority. It isn't so. You'll become that if that's your goal. But the path there, when you look back, is like a letter that I wrote to the President of the United States. Did that I only wrote because my former mother-in-law literally would not be quiet. Why don't you write a letter to the President of the United States? Have you written your letter to the President of the United States? Is your president too? I'm like, fine, I'm just going to write the letter so we don't ever have to talk about it. It was the game changer in my life. So that's the surrender.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. It's really brilliant, because what I heard in that, in my experience, is, okay, bad things are happening and you fight or flight, right? And so you're ready to fight. And then you're like, wait a minute, am I going to dump a bunch of wasted negative energy towards X, whatever X is, right? In this case, the group throwing you out. In your previous case, all this crappy things out of my control? Or do you just surrender? And for me recently, it's been my dad. My dad passed away, and I had to surrender to the fact that he is no longer there. I had to let that go, no matter how angry I am, which I still have, right? I still have grief. But where am I going to put the focus of my energy? And that's what I really heard what you said, is like, I'm not going to fight something that is outside of my control. The other thing you said, I thought this was brilliant. I wrote it down. Let those people go with love. When I coach people on, people lift you up, they either lift you up or they bring you down. One of the most common questions is, so I have to let people go, and I'm like, well, you have to set some proper boundaries, and we kind of work through it. The way you said that, I hope everyone really hears that. Let people go with love. Talk about that a little bit. How's that look when you're setting boundaries, when you're leveling up, when you're taking toxicity out of your world? How do you let people go with love? Because it's brilliant. I just want to dive a little further into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the operative word here is leveling up. So if I come from this perspective that I'm really leveling up, not that I am losing something, but let's make this real. So this particular person is a very well-known a trainer, probably about a $6 million company. And that somebody like that is threatened by somebody like me, well, what's that really mean? That's really a compliment. Because clearly she must be seeing something that I'm doing being an actual threat to react on such a low-level response. Because in my business, and I know you are the same way, you go in and you say your impact is measured by the impact you make. And that is the impact that the people that we coach or consult make. So and I was very conscious about that when I designed, my vision statement, that we help people to grow their authority and scale their impact, because my impact is measured by how much I can help you scale yours. So if you make a big impact, that is me making my impact. So mine is directly connected to yours. But what I'm experiencing is the opposite of that. So it is a direct confrontation to my core belief of my core value, right? Because it's an egocentric, I am not getting anything else out of you. Therefore, I feel compelled to put you in your place so I can feel on an elevated position. So what is the truth in that? The truth in that is that I couldn't be who I was, because I always felt that I had to be on eggshells around this person, because I was afraid that she would take something that I would say and misconstrue it. I don't even know what I said. I was really barely in the group for that reason. And still, I think she found something when she looked at my private stuff outside of that group that threatened her. That is a result of that, which is completely unethical. But that brings it back down to who am I? Who am I? I have only control over my own action and my belief system. Did I poach? No. Did I lie? No. Did I steal? No. Did I try to misuse this group? Did I go behind someone's? No, I didn't do any of these things. My conscience is clear. So it's not on me. It is on this person. So now, then what is the truth in this? The truth in this is that my feelings got hurt. And my feelings got hurt because I have an old trigger from my childhood with my very difficult relationship with my mother, where everything is always my fault. So now when something happens that I don't understand, because that's the pattern, I get triggered that I must have done something wrong, which I did not, which I didn't do when I was a child either. I was a child, but it just triggers that behavior. So we are now using the consciousness to look at what's the fact. And now I can allow myself to feel the hurt without taking it personal. And that is the surrender.
That's beautifully put. Gosh, I want to get to talking about the growth architect, and I will, I promise. But my goodness, this is just it's too good. Oh, I'm trying to formulate what I want, the way I want to ask this, because you put it so succinctly. I'm going to ask this. Here, you make bold decisions is really something that is the theme thus far. You moved halfway across the world. You write a letter to the president of the US. You sell to one of the richest people on the planet Earth. These are not normal acting decisions. These are pretty bold. Have you always been there? Or you talked about, yeah, all right, mother-in-law, get off my back. I will write the goddamn letter. But you're clearly making big choices. Where does that come from? Because I think so often the small-minded kills so many dreams that I can't because blah, blah, blah. And you talked about some of the hard wires with your own mom. So I love this. But you clearly have overcome whatever that may have been to say, I'm going to put myself out there and some amazing things are going to happen. You surrendered to the fact that I don't give a care how big it is. President of the US, I'm going to write you a letter. Talk to me about those big decisions, because I think that's a brilliant theme so far of this show.
It comes down to one very simple thing. I'm not going to drown in a puddle. It's not worth it. Make it at least an ocean.
She's so simple, but yet it's profound. Like, I thought she was going to keep going, but it's true. I'm not going to drown in a puddle. It's beautiful. All right. Talk to me about a growth architect, because again, you've built some amazing things. You face some serious adversity. And so what does that growth architect do to build the life of their dreams the way that you've been able to at this point?
Thank you. Yes. So growth architecture was born when I looked at like systems and strategies and how people look at this. So most of the time they're really overwhelmed by it, or they chase the next internet marketing strategy, the next guy that's like bombarding the world with their affiliate marketing email blast. And then you feel like you know, FOMO, and you missing out, and you have to buy that. And if you only had that one thing, then everything magically would fall into place. Well, that's all bullshit. So what I looked at business building, and I've done this for a very long time. So I'm not in my 30s and I'm not in my 40s. I'm in my 50s. And I look at this and I say, well, what experience can I give? And it's shortcuts, right? Most likely people that work with me, their ideas are way better than mine, but my methods and strategies are way better than theirs because I've done it a million times and I've already made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. So I looked at it and said, well, if I compare this to building a house, you have to build the foundation. Otherwise it won't sustain. I mean, we've just seen this in the hurricane. you have to have a blueprint to build the house. But how you furnish that house and whether the walls are blue or green or yellow or pink, whether you have the expensive faucets in the kitchen and the big, amazing bathtub in the master bedroom, or, an American standard, that's entirely up to you. You can put in whatever you want, but the structure has to follow certain rules. So I designed the 5-star success blueprint that is really, really simple. It starts with, what's your idea? Is the idea flushed out? Who is the idea for? What problem does it solve? And who is the person that we're selling to? When you have that flushed out, you go to the second, which is you make your offer, because the offer has to solve that problem. Most people start with the offer and then they think about who this is right for. That's why it already doesn't work. When you have the offer that solves a problem, you go to building your systems. You don't build your systems before you have these two pieces, because then you need the systems that are managing the offer that can solve the problem for the client. Then you go build your team, because the team needs to operate the systems that manage the offer that solves the problem. And then we get to the final star, and that is you as a leader, because then what leader do you have to be to lead the team that operates the systems that manages the offer that solves a problem for your clients? It's very simple.
As only German folks can do. It is pragmatic simplicity, and it's like really smart, though. And I mean that as a compliment. I really do. Engineering to actually have a very good sense of humor. Not all Germans do, but wow. So I what's your idea? Then make your offer. Talk about people always making their offer. That never works in sales, right? If I'm offering. And when you were talking about the FOMO on I'm already going to say it. I almost avoid LinkedIn at this point because of so much of this, get bombarded with this. Why do we get that so wrong? Why do people here? I'm just going to purge my offer on you. I'm just going to hit you when you don't even know shit about who I am. I like what you said is, what's your idea and what's the problem it's going to solve? How did we get that so screwed up as a society as a whole?
That's because we, first of all, I aim to be the only funny German that you know. I did do a comedy class, and that was my shtick, to be the funny German. That worked really well in that class. I never taken it on stage, but I had a really great time with it. To answer your question, what happens is the LinkedIn epidemic of showing up to the first date naked is what I call it. You've never spoken to me. You don't even know what I do. You don't know if I'm interested in it. You show up naked and you say, "Hey, can we sleep together?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." You missed all the other steps that the other 12 steps on how to get to know each other. How about looking at each other, holding hands, like maybe a kiss before we get naked or anything like that. So people forget that, and they forget that because they believe the messaging, if I only were to reach enough people, that I then would convert enough so that these numbers, these all important click-through open rates, are meaningful. But internet marketing is a beast that very few people can tame. And it is not, I want to say, it's probably a 1% rule in internet marketing of people who actually really figure this out, and they got to really love being behind their computer screen and doing all of this. Most people don't. Most people don't go into business because they like sitting behind a computer screen and manipulating data and numbers and words. They go because they want to make a real connection. So I think that what we get wrong is that we forego the human connection and the building of a meaningful relationship, because we believe if we were only to be able to send out the maximum number of messages allowed on LinkedIn, enough people would find this appealing, and then somehow that creates a business. And let's say, LinkedIn now with advertising, and they're making money on these things, it certainly encourages this behavior, because that's how they make money, by you making an idiot out of yourself. So the key, what I have found, especially right now, and you tell me if this is happening for you as well, is that the genuine care, connection, calling with other people is what moves the needle. It takes a little bit longer now to get a client. I will say this, right? What I used to do, close in like 45 minutes, takes me maybe now 2-3 hours, right? But that's because people are much more fearful. We have a madman on a button that, that could mean the end of the world. We have media that's gotten so bad that the messaging is so poorly constructed. Like I watch on some of those news sites that when I check back for the second time, the headline has now changed to a clickbait headline. So it was a news article like so-and-so did this and this, and then it's like, which famous actor was caught doing X, right? So it's all clickbait stuff. It takes a lot of personal integrity and conscientiousness to stay in that zone of saying, what do we really do? You and I, before we got on the interview, we connected. We had a pre-call, right? And that was because before we wanted to do this, we wanted to see if this was a good fit. Mm-hmm. And if there was resonance. Otherwise, either one of us could have walked away. That's an honest approach. And people forget that you need to treat people like they're people. We don't do business with business. We do business with people. And if you forget that, you're toast.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the world we're living in. To go to your first example, I went to college. That naked guy or gal that shows up, it's going to work. Law of numbers, so it's going to work eventually. But to what you've said a couple times, there's a word impact. You've said it a few times. To really scale, to have great impact on a relationship, it doesn't work that way. It just can't. I guess my question to you is, how do we get authenticity through the screen? As you and I said off air, look, let's have a genuine conversation. Let's not plan this out. We already have, some synergy here. We joked off air, some funny things. I mean, and you said, let's just go have a great conversation. And so in alignment with that. And my question is, how do we get that to go through the camera so that people can believe? Because again, this is a camera they see on the news, like you said, it's fear-based, it's fear-mongering, it's all this stuff. And there are some good human beings genuinely trying to impact the world positively. But man, it can be a challenge to get through some of those barriers.
Yeah, I think this is a very valuable perspective to talk about. For me personally, I find that, before I go on stage and speak, I have this moment where I pray, and where I make a conscious exercise where I drop out of my head into my heart. Because at that point, I've done all the preparation, the presentation is done. My only prayer is, let me find the right words. Let me give this audience something that will make that hour that they're here, or that hour and a half, worthwhile their time. Let me really, truly connect. Then I cannot be nervous, because it's not about me, it's about them. And then it is about really riding that particular energy. If I go into a sales call, so somebody filled out something and now we're talking, there's a part of me where I go, that money's going to look so good in my bank account. Gosh, I can pay my bills, now I can finally book that vacation, do whatever. And you have to consciously take yourself out of it and say, I got to drop out of this, and I got to drop back into my heart. Because there's a person with a real problem who is sitting there, who wants you to help them with something. And so my job, is it to sell them, or is it my job to figure out if I'm the right person to help them, and if I am, to offer that to them? So ideally they align, but the truth is if it's not the right client, it's going to be a bad experience for them, and I'm going to hate working with them. So if I go in with that, look, I don't even know if I can help you, but I'm willing to have this conversation with you to see if there is resonance. And if I can even identify what the issue is, I'm going to have to first ask you questions, and you tell me, and then I clarify this. And then once I know what it is, then I'm going to present it to you. And then you tell me if that resonates with you. And if it resonates with you, then let's explore if we are the right people to work together. If you trust me that I can help you with that. And then you make the offer. It's just a different cadence of how you approach it. And when you step out of that fear of not making the sale, or not making the money, or missing your goals, or being driven by that particular number, and you go more into gratitude and service, which are the universal laws of reciprocity and all that good stuff gets easier. But you have this, oftentimes this is just this incredible fear where you want something so bad, and then you feel like you're missing it if you're not doing all the right marketing gimmicks, right? The heavy seeding language, and this is the only time, and the offer will walk out when you walk out, right? Only available for 24 hours, only for the first 5 people. You're just going to have to ask yourself, is this who you are?
Mm.
Or are you here truly to serve? And then if you are, what would that look like?
I have to ask you on fear, because again, you make these big choices. You've talked about FOMO, you've talked about fears, and clearly, again, guys, this is what I want everybody to hear this, because people that achieve massive success, it's not that they don't have fears. They've found ways to either make it, whatever they're choosing to pursue, greater than the fear, or to somewhat tame it. The open-ended way of asking you, how do you, because clearly fear comes up, but you have an ability to say, but this is greater. My why is greater. The what I'm talking about is greater, enough to say, forget you, fear. I'm going to handle business. Or maybe it's riding along the whole time, but yet it's not controlling you. And again, maybe that's a surrender. Maybe that's controlling everything in your power. But it's fascinating. I didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but it's such a specific, poignant thing for all of us, as fear controls so many and kills so many dreams. So what, do you have a process with it, or how do you say, fuck you, fear? I got this.
There's a couple of things. So number one, I say this a lot, and I'm be happy to say it here. I live on thank you notes. So I have this thing where I tell people, if they heard or seen something, to please send me a little thank you note. Because when I have these moments where I go down the road where I said, I don't know if it's worth it. Gosh, I blew 5 opportunities in a row. It's a little tight cash flow wise this month, whatever that might be. Or I've been thrown out of group. Nobody loves me. Then I can go to my thank you notes, and I can see that I made an impact because I helped these people. There was a moment where I was in Chicago on an event, and there was this woman across the hall, and she kept looking at me, and I'm like, do I have like spaghetti hanging on my face? Or, is this like, did I miss the lipstick or something? And then, suddenly she just darts across the room. She throws herself around my neck, and she says, oh my God, I cannot believe it is you. I want to thank you in person. You changed my life. Never met this woman. I have no idea who she was. She took one of my creative life courses, the one that over like 40,000 people have taken. And she recognized, she says, I spent 3 days with you. That was the best 3 days of my life. And a moment like this for us, right, who are in this business of coaching, consulting, and helping visionaries to really scale impact, these are those most precious moments, because you know that what you said or did landed somewhere. So when I go into my fear, I remind myself how many people I've already helped. And the second thing is I ask myself, did I come here to be mediocre?
Mm.
I ask all my clients that when they're in front of big decisions. I always say, did you come here to be mediocre? Said no one ever. And so if you are not here to be mediocre, then what exactly does that mean? That's right. And it means courage. So yes, that's all you really need. You need the courage to keep the fear in check. Without fear, you don't need courage. Courageous is only the who feels that fear and does it anyway. You have to remember, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's the courage that you need to focus on, not the fear. You have the courage to figure this out.
This has ended up being all my sales guys and gals that are listening. This is an awesome sales thing because she talked about keeping it simple. She talked about truly connecting. And again, the whole idea of making it impactful. It's brilliant. The woman's code. I didn't get a chance to ask you what I'm not a woman, but I'm curious on this code. What does that mean? What is that? Because clearly you went specific to that demographic, and yet you can touch all of us, and you have today. But why the woman's code? What does that look like for you?
I actually work with probably 50-50 men and women. The women's code I created after I sold my company to Bill Gates. And then they asked me to stay on as the global director of entertainment. And I did that for 2 years. And I was absolutely shocked in the corporate structures and hierarchies on how women are treated differently than men are. And I've worked with men my entire life, never had an issue with working with men. But I always knew that I had to be different, and that I figured out what I needed to do to get what I wanted. And I realized that I had my own code, a woman's code. But I watched men on how they had their code. And I'll give you an example. So one of the big examples of the men's code is that when you go to a conference, men go decompress. Many men, not all, go and decompress at the bar. And they'll drink a couple of drinks. There's mostly men at the bar, some women, but mostly men. So I figured if everybody I want to have a meeting with is at the bar, I better be going there. So I went to the bar. And I realized that there's a whole bunch of stuff happens, which I know why women don't go to the bar, because it gets a little rowdy after a while, right? After drink 3, 4, 5, things can get a little dicey. So I came up with, under the women's code, a rule called the Cinderella rule. It means 3 drink maximum, in bed before midnight, you walk to your room alone, and you always dress up for the bar. And that kept me out of trouble. And then what happened is the next morning, because I, just suddenly disappeared before midnight, the men that were there until the bar closed, completely hungover, don't really entirely remember what they said. They probably know there were a couple of things that could probably land them in trouble. Under the men's code, I don't remember anything. And I can't say anything about anything. So I heard things on whether or not they had sex with their wives. I heard on whether they were happy or not, because, loose lips sink ships. And because I understood the men's code and kept my mouth shut about what happened, so I didn't want to run around and go like, oh my God, did you believe what happened? Jimmy, oh God, wait until I tell you that story. I said none of that. And that opened all these doors because men now understood their code. I was trustworthy. And then I thought, well, women need their own code, because unless women understand on how this works, we'll always be doing this infighting amongst each other, and we'll never get a real chance to address equality on a much larger level because we are so busy with each other, taking each other down, which is what happens amongst women, I'm sad to say, to this day, all the time. And that's why I created the Women's Code, because my first message is, you want equal treatment and equality, you better get your own shit together.
God, it's so well put. And I hate to say it too, because my wife has a couple of foundations that she's worked in and specifically tied towards women. She's at a group right now. And yet I do see that tear down. And I'll never understand it, but I see it and it does exist. I just want to ask you, because this has been fascinating. What didn't I know enough to ask you? And you're like, Jam, I have to share this with the audience. So it's open form at this point. But what didn't I know enough to ask you that you want to make sure to share with the audience before we kind of wrap up?
I think there probably would be two things. One of the questions would be, after the cash in or the cash out, why are you even out here?
That's a
Why are
good
you
one.
why are you not with a Mai Tai on a beach? And the answer to that would be that I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Bart, and he said to me, do you ever think that God's given you this so you can do the real work? I'm like, oh, Bart, seriously?
What an asshole Bart is, but it's a really not, it's true. But man, come on, Bart.
I mean, I remember this moment to this day. I looked at him like, Jesus, seriously, right? So that was like one of those pivotal moments. And then I'm like, fine, I went to Bloomingdale's. I remember I went to Neiman Marcus and I looked around and I saw a Burberry coat and it was like $2,500 for a trench coat. And my daughter pulled up a t-shirt for like $200. And I'm like, I never spent $2,500 on a Burberry coat. And I've never spent $200 on a t-shirt. And I don't think I'm going to start right now. Turned around, walked out. It's just not meaningful for me. Meaningful for me is this passion of sharing information. I mean, I went through so much. I can really give people shortcuts. And I'm happy to share that. That's really my passion and purpose. So that's number one. Number two is failure. Is like, as somebody who has failed so successfully as I have at so many different things for such a long period of time, what is it about failure? And I would say failure is the misconception that failure is actually failure. I look at failure very much like you having a GPS that's outdated, that you should have updated, but you're just not. And then suddenly that street you always go through is a cul-de-sac because they're building the metro. You would not get out of the car, throw yourself on the ground, throw a temper tantrum, like, that GPS is so mean to me. I mean, I can't believe it. I'll never drive another minute in my life. I just never will get there. You'll just go, ah, idiot, should have updated the GPS. You turn around, you find another way. That's failure. It's like somebody standing there with a sign saying, don't go here. So all you need to say is, got it, and find another way.
Well put. Well put. I love, that's a great way to kind of wrap up as we finish. But I do want people to connect with you online. Where is the best place to do that? Because we didn't dig into half the stuff that I wanted to. So we'll probably do it again, of course.
I
And I
love
look
that.
forward to
Yeah.
being on your show. But
Yes, you will be on
where
my
can
show.
we connect with you online?
Yes. So number one, so if you are a business owner and you want to know what your number one business growth blocker is, you can take the quiz and you go to growthblockerquiz.com. If you have heard something where you go, I better be speaking to her, go to uncoversession.com. Make sure you mention the show's name and make sure you say where you're coming from so that I know JM send you. And then I'll make sure that we'll, gift you with an uncovery session so that we can talk strategy about your business. And other than that, send me a little note with a takeaway, because that's my lifeblood. While we are at it, will you please go to the show on wherever you can pick up the podcast, give it a 5-star rating, maybe a little blurb on what you're taking away from the show, because it is a labor of love. And make sure that you share this with one other person who needs to hear this.
she says it so eloquently, and thank you. You're right. When you said I live on thank you notes, that is in podcasting world, that's our thank you notes. And it means so much. So you are awesome. I am so happy with how this turned out. And thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing all of your wisdom.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I mean, look, we talked about surrender. We talked about the way the world works, the universe, the fact that she was absolutely buried under debt and thrives. I mean, what an amazing show. As she said, share this, get it out there, you guys. And remember, until next time, your mindset matters. I appreciate you all. We will talk to you very soon. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.